And good evening and welcome to the Bookouture Facebook page this evening, where I am joined by the fantastic Lisa Regan, the amazing Sue Watson, and the wonderful Kate Handford. So those of you who have been on our lives before, some of you might know me. My name's Kim Nash and I'm the Digital Publicity Director, the first time I've said that since my promotion, over here at Bookouture. Lisa and Sue are both two of our best-selling authors, and Kate we've dragged along tonight because Kate is a narrator. So today is our audiobook festival, and we thought it'd be really nice to get a narrator along so that we can grill them on all sorts of things to do with audiobooks and what it's like to record an audiobook. And also just to get a different insight, really. So we've got loads of questions for you, Kate. Obviously, you also narrate Lisa's audiobooks, which is really great to have you both here. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction to everybody to start with. So we have Sue Watson, who is the USA Today best-selling author of originally romantic comedies. 4 years ago, Sue moved to the darker side of fiction with her twisty psychological thrillers and has now sold well over 1 million books. And Sue is joining us from Worcestershire in the United Kingdom.
Hi.
I feel like a quiz master. I felt a bit like, I don't know who I felt like then. I like it. We also have the lovely Lisa Regan, who's coming in from Philadelphia this evening in the United States. Lisa is the USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the brilliantly gripping crime thriller series featuring Detective Josie Quinn, which has gone on to sell over 2 million copies. And as I say, Lisa joins us from Philadelphia this evening. And Kate works in film, TV, theatre, and is an award-winning voiceover artist who has narrated over 75 audiobooks. And she's also, my son thought this was really exciting, also starred in video games, which is quite cool. And Kate, despite her American accent, is actually joining us from London this evening. So thank you much for joining me. I am going to come around to you each individually, if that's okay, and just ask you a little bit about how you have ended up where you are today, doing what you're doing, and just a little bit about your background, if that's okay. So if I can come to you first, Lisa.
Okay. I have been writing since I was 11 years old, so I've just always written. And I went to college for English and then education, didn't end up teaching. I went into the legal field as a paralegal instead. And I was always just continuously writing. My first novel was published in 2012. And I think it was around 2017 that I signed my first contract with Bookouture to write the Detective Josie Quinn series, having no idea at all that it was going to be as successful as it's been. And so started writing the series for Bookouture, and I've never looked back. I'm happier than I've ever been.
That is so lovely to hear. And Sue, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I a bit like Lisa, I did English at uni and wrote from being quite young. And I remember when I was 9, one of my school teachers said, when you write your first book, will you send me a copy? So I was always going to write, really. But I went into journalism because I thought you can't make any money out of writing books. And how wrong I was. The journalism is not a money-making career. And I ended up working for the BBC as a producer and made TV shows for a good 12 years. And then suddenly decided that actually I was going to have a go at writing a novel. And the first one was with Bookouture was Love, Lies and Lemon Cake. And after that, I just had to give up work and become a novelist. So that's my story.
Thank you so much. And Kate, how did you become an audiobook narrator?
Kind of a little bit by fluke in a way. I'm an actor as well, and I went to drama school in London, which is how I ended up here. And when I finished that, kind of found a couple of years after I finished, I met a voiceover agent and started doing little bits and pieces. But really, really early on started doing books, and hadn't even thought of voiceover as a thing I would ever do. It hadn't particularly occurred to me. And it's turned into being a huge part of what I do career-wise, but also one of my favorite things. I love it. And I think if not the first, but one of the first books I narrated for Bookouture was a Josie Quinn novel. So we've been together for pretty much as long as, I think within a few months of me doing, I think I've maybe done 2 or 3 books, maybe 4 already when I started doing Josie. So we've been together a long time, which is really nice and really enjoyable to keep coming back to. So that's been great.
Thanks, Kate. And I'm going to come back to you, Kate. You said there that you are an actor as well, and you are, at the moment, we were just talking about it actually, you are the programme on BBC One at the moment called Inside Man, and it's also on Netflix, I think is where you said at the moment.
It is, yeah. It's on iPlayer in the UK, and everywhere else in the world it's on Netflix.
So go and find Kate, everybody. And,
episode 2.
She's in there. We can all go, oh, that's Kate, our best friend. She's fabulous. But you said there that sort of narrating audiobooks is one of your favourite things to do. Why is that, Kate?
I think I always, it's a bit of in the same way, I guess, that both of you, Sue and Lisa, have said you've been writing since you were really young. I've been reading since I was really young, and also being read to. My dad, until I was about, I think from when I was 5 or 6 until I was maybe 14, I think he managed to keep me on the sofa till I was 14 reading to me. And we would read almost every night. I think he would read aloud to me from whatever we were reading at the time. We worked our way through so many amazing novels, amazing books. And I think he did such a brilliant, beautiful job of bringing the books to life. And in particular in telling, his focus was always on telling the story rather than trying to make it a cartoon or impersonate character. It was about the story, and anything else was sort of incidental. And I guess it got in there somewhere, because I've always loved reading. And when I read to myself, I often read aloud anyway. So it's kind of, it works out well this way, because I get to do it.
That's really interesting. Can I come to Sue and to Lisa? When you're writing, is reading aloud something that you do when you're kind of going through your writing process? And at any point while you are writing your stories, do you ever think about the people that they're going to be reading or listening as well through audio? Sue, can I come to you first for that one?
Yeah, I do read out loud, actually, because sometimes just the written word, you sort of have to think about it, and you read it out loud to check it sounds okay. And audiobooks are quite a relatively recent thing. I mean, I've written now 22 books, and they're all on audio, but they've only all recently gone onto audio. So for me now, it's only in the last few books I've thought about it as an audio, as another sort of platform, really. And so I do now. It wasn't something I originally did, and I think it does add another dimension to your writing. I don't know if Lisa agrees, but I think it does, because you are thinking about the voice and how it can be used, and it kind of gives us another little string to our bows as well, because if we're using different voices, or we want that mysterious person in the background, it's nice to think that's going to be a differently textured voice, and that will add to the audio for me.
Definitely. And Lisa, same for you?
I didn't, kind of like Sue said, I didn't start out with that in mind. But what I actually do is when I get to the proofread stage of every book, I use the read aloud feature, either in Microsoft Word or on PDF, which is a super robotic, it's like Josie went to the store. It's very robotic, but you can still hear if a sentence, let's say, is just really long and awkward, and so, or if maybe your word choice isn't the best, you hear things that you might not otherwise notice if you were just reading along. And then I always now kind of think, well, if Kate has to actually read this out loud, like this is a stumbling block here. So I try to do my best to eliminate those places in the narrative. But I do agree that there's an entirely new level of hearing and understanding the story in audio format than there is in terms of just reading it on the page. Because to me, everything sounds different in my head than when I've actually heard it read out loud.
And Kate, can I come to you and say, sort of ask you, when you if you know that you're going to do the next Josie, how do you prepare right from, maybe tell us how you prepared, did it matter to you that it was going to be a series, that we knew it was a series? Do you prepare differently for a series than you do for a standalone book? Honestly, Kate, I have a list of questions. I'm just going to grill you always about things like this. How do you prepare to do a reading for an audiobook?
I think it is a little bit different, I think, when it's a standalone book and when it's a series. Initially, it's the same, I think, when, as in if you're starting a new series or you're jumping into one and it's another narrator has started it, that kind of scenario, you sort of then you treat it the same way. But what's really amazing, and I will come back to what I actually do, but when you're doing a series and you have been for some time, if you're a few books in, you do get to know the characters really well, and you have a sense of the core group, and you're kind of reading it thinking like, okay, well, are we going to have a highlight of this character now, or are we going to get a bit of new backstory to somebody, that kind of thing that fleshes out. But I think in technical terms, I guess when I prep, I try and go through each book twice. First time through is kind of reading the whole book, getting a sense of the story, what the arc of the story is, where's the big climax, that kind of stuff, and also figuring out if there are new characters that I've never met before or the reader listener won't have met before, and making sure I know as much about them from the text as I can. So I write down, do they have a gravelly voice? Are they tall? Are they, anything that Lisa or any of the other writers has given in the text. And then second pass through, I highlight all the dialogue and I use a different color for every character. So that way, when I look at the page as I'm actually recording it, I can really quickly see who's in the scene just based on the colors, and I can kind of read it quite quickly that way. And it's really fun actually with a series like Josie Quinn. I've been using the same colors since the beginning because I use the same app to prep it on my iPad. So you kind of see the colors ahead. So like Josie's always yellow, Noah's always blue, and you just sort of see them and you're like, oh great, here they are, my old friends. So that's quite fun. But I don't tend to, I mean, every narrator I'm sure that you speak to will have a completely different set of annotations they make, or some people write down nothing, some people don't highlight at all, and some people it's like all covered in squiggles. I think everybody's got their own approach, but that's what I do, my highlighter.
It's fascinating, it really is. Crime and psychological thriller is probably one of the top performing genres in the audiobook market, both in the UK and the US. Why do you guys think that is, and what sort of elements of the genre sort of translates so well into audiobook? Lisa, can I come back to you on that one?
I think those types of books do really well because people like to solve puzzles. So you're doing more than just reading when you're reading a crime novel or a psychological thriller. You're actually trying to figure something out the entire book. So that kind of adds an extra layer of fun to the reading experience. You're either trying to figure out what's going on and why, or you're trying to figure out who committed the crime and why. And then the other reason I think that people love them so much and they do so well is because it's the same reason that people go to haunted houses on Halloween here in the US. Is people like to be scared a little bit, but they like to do it from a safe place. So you can be curled up on your couch or even driving in your car, reading or listening to a book, and you get that little adrenaline rush of kind of being afraid, or you can hear the suspense, the tension that's building in certain scenes in that genre. And I just think it gives people a little jolt. And I do think that translates really well in audio if you have a really good narrator, because a really excellent narrator like Kate will be able to ratchet up the tension with the scene exactly as it's meant to be, using dialogue, using her voice, using different tone, different cadence, and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. And Sue, you write sort of standalone psychological thrillers.
Yeah.
What sort of elements do you think translate for you and for your readers? What is it that you think they love about yours? Well, you have a lot of twists, obviously, in your books.
Yeah, I always like lots and lots of twists, but totally agree with Lisa really on the exactly what I would say. I think it's the puzzle solving, the mystery solving, and of course, and the big thing about the mystery solving, as Lisa will testify, I feel sometimes like, people are getting better at solving these mysteries. And so you have to be really one jump ahead of the reader. And that is really, really hard. And I think, again, sometimes, you obviously have to put clues in. So you have to give them the opportunity to guess, but you can't put too many clues in. And again, the audio, the narrator on the audio can sort of help that, in more ways, again, than perhaps the written word. They can sort of put the nuances in that perhaps, we can't always do in quite that subtle way. So for me, that's my big thing. And I think with the audio, it just, again, adds that extra texture. And also, if you've got more than one character, again, you can almost feel the tension, between characters, and that's again something that comes out in the audio. And I think, and the same psychological thrillers as the fantastic crime books that Lisa writes. I think with psychological thrillers, a lot of it is domestic. It's actually very relatable. Perhaps that's something that psychological thrillers. So we can all imagine it happening to us. We can all imagine being in a relatively happy marriage, or we pretend it's a happy marriage, or whatever. We envy other people. We look at neighbours and think, oh, I bet they're having a wonderful time over there. And actually, the reality is they're probably not. But a psychological thriller writer can tease that out and make it even more horrific what's going on across the road.
So I know one of the questions that Alba, who is I went to wave them like as if she was really there. Hi, Alba. Who is in the audience, I suppose, tonight. Alba was saying that she feels that the suspense can be really amplified in the audio formats, which comes across. But coming back to you again, how do you do that? I know you talked about how you prepare for that, but how do you get that across when you're reading out loud?
I think, you'd kind of flag that you might ask this question. I was thinking about it a lot today, actually, because I don't. I feel like with all of these books, you've both described so well. Like it's a genre that people know and love, and you come back to it because you know a little bit of what to expect to a degree, but you're also wanting that surprise. And I think in a way, it's the same when I approach it as a narrator. Each book is almost like a piece of music in a way. I think and each writer has their own. You can tell when it's Lisa's book versus when it's the book of one of the other series or books that I do. And there's I feel like I just kind of try and plug into what that music is or what the rhythm of the book is. And a lot of that is just done for you. If I just feel like if I can get in the recording booth into the headspace of this story and the character, the main character, or if we have these amazing POVs from the baddies, they're also so fun. But for me, it's about getting into that headspace and just telling the story. And it really just takes care of itself, I think, rather than it needing to feel like something added on. I think sometimes if there's a real twist and a really fun thing in the text that I need to remember, right, this chapter really has to have this feeling in order for the payoff later, then I'll write myself notes, as I'm going on. It'll say like tense into, you know, all caps or something. So you kind of remember. But I think, yeah, it's just about plugging into the character and really imagining. If you imagine you're really opening the door into this terrifying house and you don't know what's going to be in there. Yeah, that happens to your voice very naturally, I think.
But it's such a skill, because if you watched a film when that was happening in a film, you'd have some really like scary music playing in the background. And I always say, half the films that you watch, if they didn't have that music playing, you wouldn't be anywhere near as, you know, sort of your heart wouldn't be pounding anywhere near as much. So, you know, to be able to do that with just tone is incredible, really.
It's really fun. I feel like, I wonder, I don't actually know, because I think when I listen to audiobooks, and I tend to not listen to mine unless I have to for, you know, to check something, but it's a bit funny listening to your own voice. But when I listen to books that I love listening to, the ones I love the most are ones that feel musical to me in some way. And I think that is sort of what, if the written word is music, then I think the voice definitely is as well. And so I think that's kind of what, like you say, Kim, like in the film, you have the spooky music. You think about it, well, your voice has to be the spooky music in a way, as well as describing the scene and what the character's going through.
Yeah. So setting the scene and, you know, creating that atmosphere, how do you decide what you're going to do? Because you must be recording this. You must record loads of audiobooks, and it must take you a long time to do. But I'm presuming you don't do it in sort of short bursts. You must do it in quite longish sessions. So you've got to have a good memory, I presume, because I'd never remember from one character. I write books, I can't even remember the names of my own characters. And you know, memory must be brilliant to kind of remember that. And from the whole series. I don't know if I'm asking you, to be honest.
I don't know. I mean, I think some of it, especially when you're doing a long series, becomes really, I mean, it's a sort of lame answer to your question, but it does sort of it becomes a sort of second nature, in that you know these people who are populating the story so well that you can imagine how they would react. So I really approach all of them very much, and I think I enjoy doing them so much because I do think I approach them as an actor. So you're kind of imagining, you're in charge of telling this whole story. So you do have to create the sense of atmosphere in each scene and scenario, but you're also hopefully inhabiting each of these characters. So, you know, you are being Josie, and this is how she would react. So this is what would happen to her voice in this scenario. Or you're being, you know, Chief Chitwood, and he would react in a very different way. So I think, especially when it's a series, a lot of that just, it's really enjoyable to return to, because you can, or sometimes they're really surprising. I mean, sometimes, you know, Lisa will like throw a real curveball in and be like, oh, well, something pretty radical has happened to this character, which means
growth.
Like their whole life attitude shifts, and you're like, wow, okay, I have to kind of do an about face here. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know that Lisa will be throwing many more things in there just to amuse you, don't you, Kate?
I'm sure. I look forward to it.
I've completely forgot what I was going to say then. You talked about baddies there briefly as well. How do you get around the fact that sometimes the baddie is somebody that we know, but we don't know who the baddie is supposed to be, if that makes sense?
In the how do I deal with it in the narration?
Yes. Yeah, so if you've got a book and you've got a baddie, and we know it's one of the characters, but we're not quite sure which of the characters it is. When we're reading, that's probably, we're kind of looking for clues all the time. But when you've got the character that you're doing voice of, how do you get around that?
I love these. I love them. They're so fun. I treat it like, if it's from their perspective, as in if that chapter is in first person and we're getting sort of their perspective on something, I treat it like that's their inner voice. That's their inner self speaking. So it doesn't sound, of course, it doesn't sound the way that their presented self sounds. So it kind of, I mean, you do have to be really rigorous in prep to make sure that you do know exactly who it is, obviously, and you haven't, completely misjudged and they sound like nothing like themselves. But I think it's really fun because you can make them sound, I don't know, potentially, probably very sinister when you're hearing their point of view. But then when you are meeting them out in the world, they might sound completely different. But then what's great is when when eventually the big reveal happens and they come together, there's always this great moment where you get to sort of blend those two people together, and the mask comes off and it's sort of everything gets revealed. And it's almost like neither the inner voice that we've been hearing nor the presented voice is fully them. It's sort of, they are actually both of those things. So then you kind of get to bring that together into one voice. But I do try and disguise it because I think it's much more fun if you just really don't know who it is.
Brilliant. It just fascinates me. It really does. So, when you first heard your very first audiobook brought to life, how did that make you feel, and how important was it to you that it was a format that people who can't read physically read books, that they have the option to kind of to be involved in your stories as well?
Yeah, it's amazing, really. And actually, it's reading some of the Bookouture sort of posters and things that have gone out today on social media, statements, really, people saying how it's changed their lives, they can now read books. And I suppose as somebody who can see it, it's something that obviously you think about, but it's wonderful for me. I actually did have a lady who couldn't see, who read. I had one audiobook in my rom-coms originally, and she read that and she said, I want to read all the others. But at the time, as I say, we didn't have a lot of audiobooks then. All our books weren't automatically audio. And that made me really sad. And so, I couldn't wait to tell her when that changed. And so, yeah, it's wonderful. And with my thrillers, I remember my first audios were thrillers. And I can remember being in the car and downloading it. And, my husband and I were driving along, and it was like, oh my God, it just feels weird because you've written it and somebody else is actually saying it. It's the weirdest feel. It's lovely, but it's a bit surreal because you think, oh, I wrote that. What? And it's lovely though. It's a lovely feeling. And people like Kate just bring them to life. I mean, it's interesting what Kate was just saying then about, and I'm sure Lisa probably felt the same, talking about merging the characters and feeling all the characters. In a way, I think we do exactly the same job as Kate, really. The writers and the narrators, we feel it and we wonder what they're going to say, whereas Kate would wonder how they're going to say it. And I think it's just really interesting the way the two disciplines are actually really so close. The writing and the narrating, it's so close, really.
It is, very much so. And same question to you, Lisa. How did it feel for you when your first book came out in audio?
I always have the same feeling, which is I start listening to it, and then I have to turn it off because I'm like, that sounds way better than what I thought I wrote. I'll like play it for my husband, and I'll be like, I wrote this. Listen to how great it is. Because, writers, we're our own worst critics. And there's just something magical about hearing it read by someone who's really, really talented. Like I always say to my husband, Kate makes me seem like 50% more talented than I probably am, because she just does such an amazing job. And by the time I hear the audiobook, I've read this book like a dozen times in editing and I'm sick of it and I'm tired of it. And if I never see it again, I'll be happy. But then I hear Kate read it and I'm like, wow, this is so good. And I wrote it. I don't believe it. So I always have that feeling, because a really great narrator can bring a book to life in a way that I think even a writer working in your own head for months at a time cannot even imagine, that it could be so engaging and so gripping. And so with everyone, I feel the same. It's so exciting to hear it. Just it just sounds different than it did in my head, and so much better.
You are talented, by the way. And you are talented, and Laurie totally agrees with us. Look in the comments. And Lisa's just commented and said that she's an audiobook junkie, and she agrees. Kate, you were great. Lisa, do pop in the comments. What is it about audiobooks that you love? I know you say that you're an audiobook junkie, but I think it's been lovely today to hear, like Sue said, some of the comments that are coming from people. I know we have one of our bloggers whose husband is partially sighted, and he loves the fact that he gets to enjoy the books that she's reading as well, because he can listen in audio. And I think certainly, I know I definitely take for granted the fact that I can pick up a book and read it. And I think it is amazing that, that we can share that in so many different formats as well. I think it's really great. I was going to ask you, Lisa and Sue, what are the main elements of sort of writing psychological thrillers and crime thrillers that you need to put in each book? So from your, from the writing side of things, from you guys, what, do you have a format that you need to hit this many beats in your book? Do you want to hit so many targets or anything like that? Or do you just write, see kind of, see what comes out? I think I know what Sue's going to put here. I'd love to know your sort of format for writing, and what things you try and include in your psychological thriller. So I'm going to come to you first, Sue, if I may.
My format for writing starts with coffee and donuts, obviously. I think that's very important. But yeah, I mean, I call myself an organic writer, but that's just an excuse for lazy, I think. I have a synopsis, I have a great editor, and we talk a lot about what we're going to do, and it all sort of happens. But my editor's great. She'll sort of say, well, what's going to happen halfway through then? What's going to happen at the 50%? And then what's the sort of the gist of this kind of thing, and she kind of focuses me. So it's great to work collaboratively like that, because there always has to be obviously an inciting incident. I like to read books where everything starts normally and relatable, and I'm calm and I can enjoy and get into that, and then suddenly it hits, and I think my books kind of reflect that. That's kind of what I like to do. So yeah, I would have a halfway twist, but before then I like to try and get some action, something in before then, and always so far, and I don't want to say I'll always do it because I may not be able to, but I always like to have a twist at the end and then another twist, just absolutely in the epilogue or the last page, and that's kind of what I always aim for. That's my thing, I think. Lots of thriller writers do, but I just like to have that little final, you think then, do you? Well, here you go. So that's my thing, and it's as organic as that, really, apart from the donuts, which obviously are jam donuts with sugar on, and that I am particular about those. But the writing, it just happens, really.
Love it. And Lisa, same question to you.
A lot of similar elements. I mean, I'm here for donuts all the time.
Yeah.
But I usually have an outline that my editor and I have discussed, and my goal somewhere in the beginning of the book, there should always be what I call a check-in chapter, which is where we just check in with the regular characters and we see some snapshot of them in their daily life, not necessarily at work, usually, hopefully at home doing normal people stuff. And then, they'll get a call about a body, or they'll find a body. And then we're off to the races. And then from there, I like to, with each chapter, I feel as though the reader should learn something new. So if I've got a chapter where the reader has learned nothing, and the plot is not moving forward in any way, then I don't think it needs to be in the book. So I aim with each chapter to bring some piece of new information to a reader. And then, somewhere in the middle, I want to make sure that the tension is ratcheting up and not sagging. And, like Sue said, that's where your editor comes in. She will often say to me, when I send in the first draft, it started to drag a little here, or you took a long time getting started, or, your middle drags on for too long, and those sorts of things. So a great editor will really be able to pinpoint the places in the book that you can tighten up, or maybe draw out, or add more tension, add more suspense, that sort of thing. And then it's really the same as Sue said in terms of twists. I work really hard with crime thrillers to make sure that readers don't know who it is, and Sue is right, what she said earlier, that it's getting harder to do that. I mean, readers are super smart. They're very, 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 very smart. So with each book, you have to outsmart them, which is really, really difficult to do. Yeah. I do my best. And then I also if I can, I like to have that little extra added twist at the end. It's not always necessary in a police procedural so much as a psychological thriller, but it is kind of a fun thing for readers to have.
And Kate, is there something that an author could do or consider more when they're writing if you are sort of, if we were to say to an author who wants to write to an audiobook market, is there anything that you can think of that an author can do, or whether they can consider?
I don't know. I very much feel like it's so much a narrator's job to bring the story that the author has written to life. That's our purpose, is to hopefully enliven and sort of bring life to the written word. So I don't know. I almost don't know if anybody should be trying to make our lives any easier in a way. I think it's I think a lot of the way that Bookouture and both Sue and Lisa and loads of other Bookouture writers that I've read, the books are so carefully structured and obviously so carefully edited to ratchet up that suspense. And the chapters are structured in a way that you almost always end a chapter kind of going, what's going to happen next? Or they already have this kind of structure, which really does help, I think, a narrator in this genre. Because I think in other genres, you definitely, there's all kinds of other rules that apply in terms of what you want and how you want to maybe sink into an environment in a very different way. And that affects the narration for sure. But I think, so I don't know. I don't know that I have a good, any particular thoughts, because I really don't know that that's a narrator's job to try and alter the writing. I think we very much are there to facilitate the writing.
But great to know that you're not sitting there going, God, I wish they could do this.
No, definitely not. And I do really, I mean, the really fun, the sort of double twist on the end always cracks me up, because I'm you kind of, you've done your prep, you're coming to the end, and you think what's going to happen, and then there'll be something comes out of left field, and you go, oh man, that's so crazy. How's that going to affect the next book? That's great.
Brilliant. Lisa, you obviously write in series. Sue, you write in standalones. What do you think are the benefits and the pitfalls of both? And I'm going to ask Sue, I'll come to you first. Would you like to write a series? Is it something you've kind of considered? Why would you like to write a series? Do you think it would be easier, harder? All of those questions. And then I'm going to come to Lisa and ask the same question.
Okay, yeah. Well, I did a sort of series with my rom-coms. I've got 3 books that are all set in the same place with the same characters, but each is focused on a different story of a different character. So it's not quite the same as Lisa following one sort of heroine throughout. but I enjoyed that because it was lovely to return to them. And just hearing Kate and Lisa talk really, and the fact that they have this shared history with each other and with the characters, I quite envy that. I think that's lovely to be able to think, oh, you know, Kate's back with everybody again, and you know, the whole team, and she's kind of got that, she knows as a narrator or guesses how people would react. Sometimes they're different, sometimes not, but as you said, but I just think that's lovely to have that history. So I would love to have a go at that, and I would love to develop a character. I think again, in one book sometimes it's hard to cover everything, and you try and give a backstory and hint at the future and that sort of thing. But yeah, I would love to write I would love to write a series, because also you've already got your character, and it would be like meeting up with old friends again. I think Kate used that expression, and I love that. And yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, at some point. Who knows? I might do. Yeah.
And Lisa, you obviously love Josie, love the series. What do you think of the benefits and pitfalls of writing in a series? Because you have written psychological thrillers standalones before as well, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. So I enjoy the series more because it just is more comfortable, and it's a little bit easier with each book. You don't have to build up the world that they live in every single time, because you've already set this expectation. There's no surprises. It's the same town. It's the same cast of series regulars with each book. So all of that work, that kind of groundwork, is already done for you from book to book. Like you created it, it's finished, there it is. And so it's very comfortable, and the characters become like old friends. It's kind of like Kate was saying, like you tend to know how they're going to react in any given situation. Although I do like to do the curveballs, because I think characters, like people, should grow and change. But for the most part, it's just a very comfortable writing experience, which I think makes it a little more fun. And I think the pitfalls are just that, you know, with each book, you have to come up with a fresh new way to tell what is essentially the same story, which is that a crime has been committed and now the heroes are going to solve it. I mean, it's the same formula with every book. So you have to come up with fresh ways to tell that story to keep readers engaged. And while the world you've created and the series regulars you've created it's a very comfortable thing, you still have to work within those confines that you've created for the series. So that, I think, makes it a little more challenging over the long haul of the series. But, you know, part of the fun for me of writing the series is, you know, the stakes for me get higher with every book because I don't want to disappoint my readers. So it's kind of fun to be challenged and to be stimulated in that way.
And if we can go back to talking about your characters, and we'll come back to you because and talk about Josie. When you started writing the series, firstly, I suppose my question is, did you ever think you'd be writing the 16th book in the series?
No. I didn't even think I'd be writing the 4th book in the series.
So how have you, across the years, how has Josie's journey kind of developed for you, and how have you been able to do that? Because I suppose you didn't know where she was going, did you?
No, I did not. I had no idea. And I've said this in a lot of interviews before, that if you look at the first 3 books in the series, there's probably a pretty complete arc in terms of the story and where she starts out, the revelations of her backstory, and then the growth, because I never thought that readers would like the series as much as they do. So I thought, you know, after 3 books, I'm going to be back out there in the world looking to write something else and do something else. So it's really been a thrill for me to be able to continue from there. And what I try to do with every book is she should be challenged in some way that either she hasn't been challenged before, or it's going to bring up some past trauma for her, and she's going to have to deal with it, both the case and her own personal demons. So kind of the fun of writing Josie is that every book I just kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at her and see what happens, and hope that she will grow from it and change and be a little stronger or a little less angry or a little more forgiving, a little more compassionate. And I think as a human being, there's no end to the situations and scenarios in life that are opportunities for growth if you're open to it. And so for a fictional character, it's kind of the same thing.
How do you remember everything that's happened in life? Or have you got a really good memory as well as Kate?
No, I don't have a good memory. I have a series Bible. So everything, it's just a Word document. It's color-coded by book. A very lovely lady named Claire Milto reads every book after I've written it, and she puts in all the new information. And so I have that document open whenever I'm writing a new book so that I don't get anything wrong from the past.
Fantastic. And Stu, can I talk to you about your characters that you create in your stories? Obviously, you don't have the same characters to go back to. How do you develop your characters in sort of a shorter period of time? And how do you, do you keep all the information for your characters in your head or in a sheet or?
Well, I could probably do with Claire Milto actually, because I terrible. And what I find sometimes is, readers are so lovely, and they'll contact me on Facebook and say, "Oh, what do you think happened next?" Or "What happened with Claire when she did blah blah blah?" And of course, when you've written 22 books, you're not even sure which book it is, let alone which character it is. So, I'm not very organised. So I usually have another donut and go through the books. I know it might be. So I'll have a think. I do actually know most of my characters' names, but then I have to think about what happened. So no, I don't, and I don't. As soon as I open the book and start looking, I think, here we are. Of course, I remember this now, and it's all there. But it must get pushed down. It must have to get pushed down in order for everything else to come in. And I find with my characters, I suppose, and my books, I think thinking about it, I've never realised it before until you just asked the question. But I think for me, I actually have a story and a setting, and I put the character in it and see how she usually. And he, but more often than not, my heroine is centre, how she reacts really. And then I think for me, it's about the third edit. So it's quite a way in before I actually know who my character is. I don't start with a character and I think, oh, she's going to be feisty, she's going to be strong, she's going to be. I just put her in and let her grow into the book really. And then by about the third edit, I think, oh no, she wouldn't do that. So for me, I know what Lisa's saying. It must be lovely to just go into your book and think, here we are, here's the characters, now I write the story. Whereas for me, I'm having to develop and, move the character along that I don't even know in the first two drafts, really. And then I start to know. And then by the end of the book, I really know them and like them and miss them, but I never see them again. So it's a shame, really.
What's the best bit of writing advice that you've ever been given? And what advice would you give to somebody who wants to write a psychological thriller or a crime thriller series? Lisa?
Ooh, how much time do you have? The best, if I had to pick one, for me, the best piece of advice I've ever gotten is just to keep writing. You just keep producing new stories, keep writing new stories. I don't think you can pin all of your writing dreams on a single work, because you continue to develop and hopefully improve as you work on your craft. So it's just keep doing it, keep writing, keep producing new stories. And what was the second part of your question?
I can't remember the question. What's the best bit of writing advice you've been given, and what would you give to somebody else?
Oh, that would be, would probably be the same. But, now I remember, you did say in terms of police procedural, I would say, that's the best piece of advice I've been given, is to continue to produce new stories. I would give that as advice. And if you're going to write police procedurals, you should absolutely know the genre, know what conventions and tropes are being used in the genre, and then do your research. You're not going to be able to make things perfectly realistic, but you can make them authentic. So you should definitely have some subject matter experts in law enforcement that you can speak with, because 100% readers will notice the procedural mistakes and they will call them out.
Absolutely. And Sue?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As soon as you said that, as soon as you asked the question, Kim, I thought exactly the same as Lisa. I think because we've both been writing for a while, we both can say, you know, you can't stop. I mean, I had lots of rejections before I started. We've all got those stories, haven't we? And you know, and it can really knock you. And you know, a lot of people do get knocked in those first 2 or 3 rejections, those first 50 rejections, and never write again. But I think for me, I don't know whether Lisa felt the same, but I felt almost like I had to do it to erase those rejections. Almost, I had to actually, you know, get through it and produce a book. And you know, actually holding that book in your hands for the first time, if you can sort of focus on that, if you haven't yet published, and that's, you know, just focus on that, because there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. It's almost like holding your baby for the first time, almost. It has the edge. The baby has the edge. Just only just. Obviously, holding a donut is better than anybody. You know. So yeah, I would say definitely the advice would be to keep writing, focus on the end game, focus on your goal, that you want to hold that book in your hand, because ultimately that's what you're aiming for. And I think if you can visualize it, that can help. And just, you know, turn that hurt into something positive, and, you know, try and record those feelings when you get rejected, and use them, you know, in your novel if you can, in those ways. That's I think that would be my advice now, I think, to give to anybody. What was the original question?
What
about advice for people who want to write psychological thrillers?
Specifically for psychological thrillers, yeah. I think, you know, it's again, it's slightly different from you, Lisa, in that it obviously isn't really police procedure, although I do actually have a couple of friends who are police and lawyers, and I do ask their advice. That I'm lucky like that, but I don't have to do it in quite the same way you do. But I think for me, again, it's back to the domestic, and it's friends who might say something. You know, I might just be out with friends and they might say something about something their husband said, and I sort of take that, and I know it's perfectly innocent, but I can listen to it and see something a little bit sinister, or create something a little bit sinister. So I think it's about listening and watching and just being in your own life. And my excuse for not staying in and writing all the time when I've got deadlines, and I should, is that I have to meet my friends for ideas for the next book. So so I do think for domestic thrillers, you've got to mix really with people that you're writing for, the same sort of audience that you're writing for. So I suppose in that way I have it a bit easier than Lisa, really, because I don't have to, you know, I can just make it all up and just, you know.
And Kate, what would you advise people who might want to be a narrator or an actor even? What would your best advice be?
I think, well, I mean, in a different way, I think it's kind of the same as just keeping at it. I think that's pretty solid advice, no matter what it is that you're trying to do or want to do, or think maybe you want to do. You know, just figure out a way to give it a try. I mean, when everything was locked down initially, and we hadn't quite, I mean, I was really lucky and got to keep recording books all the way through, which was so great. But in that brief period where everybody was completely frozen, I had some recording equipment at home, and I sort of thought, well, I'll just read some bits of the novel that I'm reading right now, and I'll just record them, and I'll send them to my mum and my auntie, and, you know, and just to kind of keep something going out. And that's something that anybody can do. And if it's something you're interested in, to kind of practice it, and do make yourself listen to yourself, and kind of give yourself some notes, or send it to a trusted friend or somebody, a family member maybe, and kind of say, what do you think of this? How's this sound? But yeah, I think for me, I feel like to continue being sort of passionate about anything, you've got to continue being passionate about all things. You know, I think it's really difficult to, it's exactly what you're just saying, Sue, that in order to still be any good at narrating books, I have to continue to enjoy reading other books, and I have to continue to enjoy going out in the world and to the cinema, and, you know, being that weird person who's listening to conversations on the train and kind of going, oh, that's a great voice. You know, that sounds amazing. Like, you know, I love the way they express that. That's so funny. You know, that kind of stuff. I think in any art form, we draw from all life to make it happen. So I think that's really crucial too, to kind of not get so focused that you're eliminating everything else from life as well.
Oh, I love that. I love the thought of you sitting on the train listening to people.
I know.
So if you would be going, I'd be scribbling, oh, look what she'd be doing. You're going, oh, I wish she said that.
Yeah. I'm just listening, and then I'm later trying to recreate it on my voice memos on my phone.
Do you not record people?
What's that?
You could record people.
I know, but you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, no,
that's very bad form.
I was only joking, obviously. So you've also talked about how much you enjoy reading. We've talked a lot about audiobooks. Are you listening to or reading something at the moment that you would like to tell us about, Kate?
I'm listening currently to an amazing audiobook. It's an Ursula Le Guin novel, and it's called The Wizard of Earthsea, and it's narrated by Cobna Holbrook-Smith, who's a brilliant British actor. It's wonderful. Ursula Le Guin is a fantasy novelist, sci-fi novelist, if anyone doesn't know her. And she's an amazing world builder. And Cobna does such a great job of bringing that world to life. He's got an amazing voice and does great characters. So that's really fun. I'm listening to it.
Thank you. And Lisa?
I tend to do this when I'm working on a first draft. I'm listening to a book that I've read multiple times and listened to multiple times, which is the Orphan X series by Greg Hurwitz. I tend to listen when I'm working on a first draft. I don't like to necessarily read or listen to something new, because what happens is then I get swept up in it and I don't do my own work. But I like to stay in the creative world and the world of novels and that sort of thing. So I will listen to something that I've already heard, or I will read something I've already read. And it's usually like Greg Hurwitz. I will re-listen to the Angie Marson's books, the Kim Stone series. That narrator is unbelievably fantastic. So I'll often listen to those, or Karen Slaughter, Chelsea Kane, that sort of thing. But like I said, it has to be something I've already heard. So I know what happens. I'm comfortable turning it off to do my own work.
And Sue?
Yeah, I mean, unlike Lisa, I can't even read or listen when I'm in first draft mode, because I would just soak it all in, I'm sure. So I'm not reading anything at the moment, but my last book was, I actually chose it for a book club I belonged to, and it was Frida McFadden's The Housemaid. And I'd chosen it, and because I'd chosen it, obviously I'm not very good at book club. They let me go and drink wine, and they talk about books, and I try and change the subject because I haven't always read the book. So because I'm a bit naughty, I thought I should really read the book that I've chosen, because I really fancied it. And so because I didn't have a lot of time, I was doing a lot of driving, going to see my daughter, and she lives a long way away. So I put that in audio in the car, and just the miles melted away. It was just absolutely brilliant. And I loved it. And I think with The Housemaid, it's basically, if you haven't read it, I'm not giving any spoilers, but it's about two characters, and they're quite different characters. And it must have been a real challenge for the narrator. But what was interesting was, I was just driving along, but I knew who was talking, every time. And that's obviously down to Frida's dialogue as well. I mean, it was just a fantastic combination of talent all coming together, and it was wonderful, and I really enjoyed that. And I do read a lot of audiobooks, but as I say, at the moment, that's my latest. That was probably about a month ago. So I'm now in my own writing at the moment, and it's devoid of any pleasure other than the obvious. I won't mention donuts again.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice. So, believe it or not, we have been chatting for an hour. It just flies by when we're doing these calls. Sue, your recent book that came out was called The Nursery, which came out in October, which is available now in audio, ebook.
I just happen to have it here. Oh, that. What do you mean? Oh.
It's almost like you've rehearsed that. And you've also, I believe, if I'm right here, The New Wife and The Forever Home are both on offer at the moment as well.
Oh, would you believe it? These actually are interesting from an audio point of view, in that they're both obviously on audio, and also they're 99p at the moment, and you don't have to belong to Audible to listen to them on audio. And if you buy them one for 99p on ebook, then the audio would be £2.99. So for £4, you get the ebook and the audio. I'm not trying to sell them. But I actually thought at one time you had to belong to Audible to listen to an audio. So it's interesting that you can actually get quite a good deal if you, particularly if the book's on at 99p. So those two are on at 99p at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. And Lisa, your latest book, which came out in August, was Local Girl Missing, which was the 15th book in the series. And just in time for Christmas, on the 12th of December, book 16 is going to be out, and that's called The Innocent Wife, and that's on pre-order now.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. And I believe book 1 and book 2 in the series. Book 1, if you haven't read Lisa Regan book before, The Vanishing Girl, which is the first book in the series, you can grab for $1.99.
Yes.
I believe at the moment, which is fantastic, but really looking forward to book 16 in the series coming out. And as I mentioned earlier, if you weren't around, you can see Kate on Inside Man, which is on BBC iPlayer or Netflix at the moment as well. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. I could sit and talk to you all night. It's been fascinating to listen to things from your side of things as well, Kate. So thank you, really, for coming along and having a chat. It's been really insightful, and I've still got loads of questions. So maybe you'll come back another day and answer some more of them for me.
Yeah, anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. I know you said Lisa, Kim, Sue, and Kate then, but just realised that Kim's actually me. If I could get you ladies just to stay where you are for the moment, and we will say goodbye to everybody else. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It's been great to see everybody send in the comments. I really do appreciate it. And if you would like to leave any comments, we can still go back to if you have any questions for any of the authors or for Kate here tonight, or any comments or any questions about audiobooks, or tell us how much you love audiobooks. It's been a great festival today. We've done so much about audiobooks, so it's been really nice to concentrate on one particular genre that we don't always concentrate on. So thank you all very much for joining us, and join us in our next Facebook Live. Thanks so much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.